We're finally here at the season finale of the Ishaan S show, and we've done so much amazing work here for these past 9 months. And honestly, this credit all goes to you. So I'd like to just thank you real quick before we get into the episode today. And I wanted to make a couple of requests of you. First off, if you can, please share this episode and all your other favorite episodes with your friends and your family. It always helps the show. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We always appreciate every follow that we get because it helps spread the word about the show. And lastly, if you want to stay in touch with the IshaanSshow.com, then join our email list by subscribing to the Political News blog, where you will get updates on political news stories, breaking news posts, and updates about the show, all from the IshaanSshow.com. There are so many ways that you can help the Ishaan S show, and we always appreciate every bit of help that we can get. So if you can, please, again, share this episode, follow us on our social medias, and subscribe to the Ishaan S show. And now, the great episode we have planned for you starts right now. Welcome back. Season finale. Today is the Season 2 finale for the Ishaan S show, and this past season, we've seen all kinds of interesting headlines from the COVID-19 pandemic to election night surprises in states like Georgia and Virginia. And we've seen foreign policy crises, including the ones in Afghanistan and Ukraine. Today, we're going to take a look back at some of the biggest stories we covered this season, take a look at some of the biggest ones right now, and a leap into the future for what we might have in store for Season 3. We'll be taking a look at those stories and more today, June 28th, 2022. From Ishaan Media, this is a special edition of the Ishaan S show, the Season 2 finale, with me, your host, Ishaan. And we're here. Welcome, friends, to this special edition of the Ishaan S show, marking our Season 2 finale. Thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been one heck of a ride these past 8 or 9 months with literally everything happening. I'm so honored that you welcomed me whenever I posted a new episode, and you guys listened to my analysis, my coverage of stories. It's truly an honor. And there's so much that I can say about Season 2, and honestly, I don't know where I can start. But this past season, I should first say, was actually very likely not going to happen. It's something I've shared with very few people, but I really did not think that this season was something that I could consider feasible to manage or produce. And there was a multitude of reasons. One of it's because I'm in high school. Free time isn't really built into the job description. You kind of have to make your free time. But in addition to that, I started doing a lot of work in politics. I have been working on other things as well. So initially, this was not even something I could imagine doing. It was initially with great reluctance that we had the premiere for this season. And I remember when I was recording that, I said that I just sat there restless and I couldn't not make new episodes covering politics. But the truth is, yes, there was something that really pushed me to do it. There was something that was just lingering and urging me to start again, but I wasn't as on board with doing another season in the middle of the school year. But I don't know what it was that was pushing me, but whatever it may be, I'm so glad I listened to it. While admittedly the schedule for this season has been erratic, to say the least, I'm happy that in the end here we started getting out new episodes every week talking about some of the most pressing issues in politics. And I'm so glad with the reception that this show has gotten. The support we've gotten has only been a marker of the proof for that. This season, we've hit all kinds of records, ones that honestly I didn't even imagine could be possible going in. This season, the website has had its busiest days ever. We've set 3 records in terms of listenership. You might have even seen it on our social medias a couple of weeks ago. We've just seen our biggest audience jump or increase and it's listeners from, it may not be the biggest, but it's listeners from all over the country that are listening to our show. And that just goes to show the amazing influence that politics can have on people, because it impacts everybody. And with your work and sharing these episodes and sharing our Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, it helps so much. And seeing all of this, I'm even more excited for season 3, because I know we'll do great things. And then I'll just throw it out there. Stay tuned on the IshaanSshow.com for some interesting things in the works. There is something amazing about this show that has drawn people of all ages, of all backgrounds, of both political parties, to create such an unimaginable and diverse audience that you just don't see with other podcasts and news organizations that are at our level these days. We're doing this. We're taking on the banner of unbiased and fair journalism, and I'm proud of that. And I don't know how to convey exactly how I feel about this, so I'll simply say thank you. Thank you for making this show, this season, so amazing. We would have never made it here without you. Okay. That was enough of a monologue. I'll save the best for last, so stay tuned for the end of the episode to hear my full message of thanks. But for now, let's talk about some of the biggest headlines and political news, because that's what we do here at the Ishaan S Show. Of course, the biggest news coming out of this weekend is indeed the Supreme Court ruling on Roe versus Wade that the court overturned, changing much of the political landscape for this country. For my friends who don't know, Roe v. Wade was a Supreme Court decision that essentially ruled the right to an abortion as a constitutionally protected freedom. After really decades of work from conservative groups and successfully taking the court, especially through President Trump's term, they managed to overturn this nearly 50-year precedent. That ruling sent shockwaves in American politics on both sides. Even despite the fact that we had known this was going to happen, everybody was talking about it. And we had known that this was going to happen because of the opinion that it was leaked to Politico, and they reported on this back in May, which we covered on the show. And whatever it may be, several Republican states had trigger laws in place which were essentially written to ban abortions as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned. Now, as of the recording of this episode, 21 states have either banned abortion or are very likely to take that step. And then on the other side, many Democrat states are now expanding access to abortion in their states to their own residents as well as out-of-state residents. Many companies, including Disney, Apple, Amazon, and Tesla, have said that they will introduce new policies that pledge to cover the travel costs for their employees who decide to get an abortion if they live in a state that bans it. Now, this ruling is truly one of the biggest political stories and definitely Supreme Court stories of our time. I mean, I don't think we're going to be seeing a bigger culmination of work on either side of the political aisle reach the intensity or magnitude that Roe v. Wade has managed to achieve, at least in modern history. And there are very few instances like this that we've seen in the court's history. And so if you want to read more about the decision and reaction, you can read that all on the IshaanSshow.com. Then another top story. We brought this to you on Friday as well. The Senate and House voted to pass the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is a piece of legislation that aims to keep firearms out of the possession of dangerous individuals through various measures, including enhanced background checks, promoting red flag laws, and tackling gun trafficking. The legislation was led by a bipartisan group of 20 U.S. senators this group was led by Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, and Senator John Cornyn of Texas, a Republican. This bill's passage represents one of the few instances of bipartisanship, which is rare in our political discourse today. And it's not that we saw this bipartisanship for political reasons. I think this bill, the passage of this bill, is a genuine desire from both sides to want to work together. Of course, after those two horrific shootings in Uvalde and Buffalo. Glad to see something get done. President Biden, who signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act on Friday, is in Europe today to meet with our G7 partners to talk about all kinds of things, ranging from the Russian invasion of Ukraine to figuring out how to manage the rapid increases in the costs of goods that has rocked the entire Western economy. We'll be keeping an eye on that story. All right. So those were some of the biggest stories of the past couple of days. Now, because this is our season finale, I didn't want any one story to take the spotlight and perhaps overshine the fact that this episode is dedicated to the work we've done this season. So I thought it'd be nice to just take a look at some of this season's top stories that we covered here. Now, we started the season talking about our hiatus, what happened over our part summer and part autumn break between August and October. We talked about things like Governor Cuomo resigning. We talked about the Afghanistan withdrawal. We talked about the campaign at the time, which was still which was still getting its work done. And then the next episode was 3 days after Election Day, our first Election Day here at the Ishaan S Show. While I didn't have any special reports, I did cover the results, and what we saw was a very big victory for Republicans in the state of Virginia, where Glenn Youngkin won the governorship and Winsome Sears won the lieutenant governorship. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, an incumbent Democrat, Phil Murphy, won re-election, albeit by a narrow margin. That election, I remember, represented, I think, maybe the first pre-shock of the 2022 midterms with President Biden and his handling of the political climate and political scene right now. It was a victory day for Republicans, that election. And I think that was kind of a precursor to what we might be seeing in the midterms later this November. After that, we took a big leap, and we skipped 3 weeks of episodes and jumped to the next episode, which was about President Biden's dropping approval ratings. While at the time we thought that it was something minor with the fallout from the Afghanistan crisis, that it might eventually clear up, in the months since, it would come to tarnish President Biden. Now we're seeing his worst approval ratings of his presidency so far, sitting at 38%, and some even say as low as 36%. Then we did our first Season 2 election discussion episode. That was an election coverage, but election discussion. In that episode, I talked about the developments in the races for governor in various states, including Texas with Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke, and in Georgia with Stacey Abrams and the Republican primary opponent, incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, and his Trump-backed primary challenger, former Senator David Perdue. Now, if there's anything we've learned from the Trump primary culture that we have now in the Republican Party, you know that if you're a Republican and you have an opponent who's backed by Donald Trump, things look a little slim for you. But an update on that race, Brian Kemp actually ended up winning his primary with a very large margin, despite the fact that he faced a Trump-backed primary opponent. David Perdue ended up losing, and so now Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams are going to be going against each other again like they did 4 years ago. But this time, they have a much larger national profile. Well, each of them has a much larger national profile, so all eyes are going to be on Georgia. Then, of course, after that episode, we had our political year in review, where we talked about the craziness of politics in 2021. It was the Ishaan S Show's, I think, first special, and that was it had a lot of listeners. We did so well with that episode, so I hope to have more in the future. Then the first episode of 2022, which came out on January 7th, we talked about the first anniversary of the January 6th riots. And then we'd also talked about some of the plans of the January 6th committee. And in the months since, they have done an interesting amount of work to try to prove their case, and now they're holding those public hearings, but more on those in a second. But after that episode, insert a 2-month break, and we return to talk about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, this rocked the entire world. And so we talked about in that episode about all the parties involved and the implications of a war like this. And then in the following episode, we talked about President Biden's trip to Europe for emergency meetings with our G7 partners and NATO, among others, to talk about the invasion. Fun fact, that episode would become this show's best performing episode. So thanks for that. Then a month and a half later, we talked about the bombshell leak of the draft Supreme Court opinion that told us that the court had intentions of overturning Roe v. Wade. Of course, we know what happened with that. That episode actually also came out on the 1-year anniversary of the Ishaan S show's trailer. We marked our first year with that episode. And, we really celebrated that milestone moment, and I'm so honored that we had the privilege of being able to mark such an occasion. And we were also joined in that episode by our very own Ben S., who is our media technician here, for some analysis in that episode. Then the following episode, we talked about some primary elections that happened in the month of May. Very exciting stuff. We saw the power of the Trump endorsements surprisingly wane just a little. And we also saw other interesting races in Idaho and North Carolina with Madison Cawthorn. We saw things in West Virginia, all kinds of interesting stuff. But then immediately after recording that episode, I lost my voice. And that was just days before my birthday, which happened to be in the middle of finals. So after a lot of consideration, I kind of thought maybe I should take a break. But when we came back, we talked about the recent devastating uptick in gun violence and mass shootings, including the events in Buffalo and in Uvalde. That episode, we also had on our very first guest with Jacob Shropshire joining us to talk about all kinds of things in the headlines. I joined them on their show too, and it was so much fun. The next episode, we talked about the January 6th committee's first public hearings, and we talked about where they would take us. And, of course, we've been watching those January 6th hearings. In fact, as another piece of news to, I guess, include, the January 6th committee is holding an unexpected hearing. I guess it'll be Tuesday when this episode comes out. They are holding a hearing at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, June 28th. So if you're interested, you can go listen to that after this episode is almost over. Then we talked about, after that episode, we talked about the inflation crisis, and we were joined by our very first political guest, State Senate candidate Maria Peterson. And, of course, last week we talked about some 2024 election updates. And like I promised there, I'm working on my list for candidates to watch. So subscribe to the IshaanSshow.com's political news blog to get updated on that. This has been a wild season, and it's been beyond most of my expectations in terms of the headlines we'd be covering. But when we come back, I'll talk about all kinds of things in the works. I'm going to wrap up this season, and we'll talk about the future. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. Okay, that was the last break of this season. Now, when I left and concluded the first season, I was truly very sad about it. And people ask me all the time, Ishaan, it's literally your show. Just record an episode and upload it whenever you want to. And I honestly wish it could be that easy. I wish it could work that way, but it isn't. It's a lot harder than that. So just making a new episode, isn't how news production works, and neither do I like to work that way. Political news is something that requires real effort and commitment, and I value that for this show. It's why we have such a large base of Republican and Democrat listeners, young and old. People appreciate the proper work that gets put into this, and I have no interest in compromising on that. That's why it became so hard for me to leave for season 1, because I just wanted to keep talking politics, but I just wasn't sure how to manage the rapid growth of this show and also continue to improve on it, especially when I was returning to school. And it was my first time back in person, like for real school, in a long time. So I wasn't sure how on earth I was supposed to come back to cover political news stories like this and also focus on other stuff outside of the show. And that's why I was so nervous about leaving. But I left and I came back. I came back with every intention of making this season the best. And we did that. We really did. We talked about some interesting stories. We reached more audiences. Our team here at Ishaan Media grew. It was truly amazing. And that's why I don't feel too nervous about this hiatus. I know I'll be back for season 3. I know I have an idea of when I'll be back. And I also know that we'll be back soon. And when we do come back, you're going to love season 3. Next season, I want to have more and more guests like Jacob Shropshire and Maria Peterson because we are now approaching the midterms. This show's first major election. I want to talk to all kinds of people on all aspects, all sides, every corner of the political spectrum. I want you all on my show, and I want to bring you more coverage on the 2022 midterms. So if you are a political candidate, or if you're in political media, or if you're involved in politics in any respect, and you're interested in coming on the show, go to the IshaanSshow.com and fill out the appearance request form, and I'll work with you to have you on. Or you can email contact@theishaanshow.com with your inquiry, and we'll get back to you. And again, I also want more contributors to help out Ishaan Media. That form that I talked about, which I'm just realizing I forgot to link in the previous episode. That form that I was talking about. We've gotten applicants, which I'm so happy about, and you know who you are. So thank you so much for applying. And if you want to apply, you want to help out the Ishaan S Show, there's no commitment, nothing necessary. If you just want to help us out, write a few stories for the political news blog, go on the IshaanSshow.com and sign up to contribute today. And then here's something. I specialize in presidential politics. I really enjoy it. So next season, I think it's very likely that we are going to be entering the next presidential election in the midst of that season. So I want to talk and dedicate more episodes to 2024, and I hope to cover a Republican and possibly even a Democrat primary, depending on what Donald Trump and Joe Biden decide to do. Because, of course, a Republican primary and a Democratic primary are both very much contingent on their decisions. But look, there's a lot in store for the future of this show. So in order for you to stay in touch, add yourself to my email list by subscribing to the political news blog. You can find that option literally everywhere on the website. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for breaking news posts and updates about the show, including when we'll be back for season 3. And you will not want to miss that. There are so many exciting things for the future of this show and Ishaan Media, so stay tuned. We'll be right back again in just a second. Producing and editing this show has been the honor of a lifetime, honestly. I don't know how I got so lucky with you great people coming to support this show. We would have never made it as far as we have in these past 13 months without you, the listeners, coming together and showing me your support. I'm honestly in awe of the amazing support that I've been humbled to receive. Not many political podcasts started by young people like myself make it too far, yet somehow we have been able to do something together, which is amazing that and it's even more amazing that we're about to wrap up our second season and we're already preparing for our third. It's incredible. Our country's unique political system is one that no other country has or will ever have, and this world of American politics is what makes it so much fun for me to cover. It's like a living, breathing thing. Every day, something that comes from politics will impact our lives as citizens of this country, and I'm truly honored that people entrust me with this show as a means of getting their political news. That's wild. You guys have told me that you listen to this show, follow us on social media so that you know what's happening in the political world. And I try very hard to maintain this audience and grow it by standing with my mission to report unbiased, objective journalism, and I'm proud of that because we have listeners on both sides of the political aisle. And whether or not you agreed with my analysis, I'm grateful that you gave me your time to report to you, and I hope you stay with us. And while we're going to go on a break, I hope to return soon to talk about more topics, profiles, the 2022 midterms, and 2024. If you've liked my analysis, then go ahead and subscribe to the Ishaan S Show political news blog. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook too. Share this episode and all your other favorite episodes with your friends and family. And thank you. Thank you to all the people who make this show possible. Thank you to my great team here at Ishaan Media. Thank you to Jacob Shropshire and Maria Peterson for joining us this season as our first guests. Thank you to all my friends who have diligently shared episodes for me. And of course, thank you to the amazing listeners for making my dream possible. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. It's been an honor to report to all of you. This is the Ishaan S Show. I'm Ishaan, and I'll see you guys for Season 3. Bye.